Oh, my mum's messaging me. Morning, darling. Morning, mum. I f***ing love my mum. What's happening, my fellow geeks and geekettes? Welcome to a brand new episode of Cosplay Chris, and today we are talking spoilers and Easter eggs for Spider-Man No Way Home. The film has been out for several days now. The whole world has had a chance to digest this monumental epicness of a film. So again, today is all going to be about spoilers, major spoilers, and some Easter eggs that were thrown into the film that were just oh so beautiful. Fan service. Now obviously, being a spoiler-filled video, warning, spoilers are ahead, but honestly my spoiler-free review of Far From Home was one of the hardest reviews I've ever had to do in terms of just being so vague and just not being able to say anything in general about the film. In terms of giving away plot points, characters, stuff like that, and just talking about and touching on the stuff that we had seen in trailers, promotional stuff, and posters, etc. Now in terms of my thoughts on the film, they have not changed at all. It is, in my opinion, one of my most favorite MCU films and my most favorite Spider-Man film to date. So if anything, one thing that I would nitpick, it was actually brought to my attention by Chris Stuckman. When I watched his fantastic review, he did a wonderful review on the film, even though it was spoiler-free. He did his absolute best to try and be as vague as possible. He did bring up one issue that, upon reflection, I did have with the film. It's not even that major. It was more or less just to do with the editing and the introduction of Willem Dafoe's Norman Osborn / Green Goblin. The very first shot we see of Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn in the film, it just seems very abrupt. We see a close-up of his helmet on the dumpster, and it literally just cuts straight to Norman listening to his alter ego, the Mask, talking to him. And I kind of just felt that was quite abrupt, but I kind of respect where they're coming from. It was just one of those things where, whoa, he's here, and he's probably feeling the same. He's like, where am I? I'm here all of a sudden in this new dimension. From an editing standpoint, if it is on purpose, I kind of get where they're coming from. If anything, it just took me by surprise. Again, it's not going to deter from the fact that this is a fucking brilliant film. I do have my paper towel on standby. The heat has finally set in here in Sydney, and it is so humid today. It's disgusting. You can literally eat the air. It's that bad. Oh, my mum's messaging me. Morning, darling. Morning, mum. I fucking love my mum. Okay, so I've got dot points on my phone of what I want to talk about and touch on, so we are going to be touching on major spoilers and some very cool Easter eggs that were thrown into the film. Now I've got that one little nitpick out of the way, let's get to one of the first major spoilers in the film, and that is Charlie Cox as Matt fucking Murdock. It was so cool to see him interacting with Peter, with Aunt May, with Happy, and it was always speculated that Charlie Cox was doing a cameo in this film as Matt Murdock. We thought we saw his arm in one of the trailers in the interrogation room, but that was debunked. And then a picture leaked online of the exact same scene that was seen in the film of Matt Murdock, Aunt May, Peter, and Happy. And Matt Murdock was trying to help Peter out and give him legal advice in terms of what to do next, now that the whole world knows that he is Spider-Man. And obviously we know Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock from the Netflix Daredevil series, and it's just great that they've taken that universe and pulled it into this one as well. And obviously Peter doesn't know that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, but we do see that one shot where the brick or the rock comes through the window and Matt Murdock catches it. Okay, now here's a fun little Easter egg for you and a little bit of nerdy trivia. So the MIT administrator that Peter saves on the bridge when he has that encounter with Doc Ock, her number plate on the car reads 63A5M-3, and that's a nod to issue 3 of The Amazing Spider-Man, released in 1963, which sees Otto Octavius involved in an experiment that goes wrong, fusing his mechanical arms to his body. So again, just little things like that is brilliant. The fact that this is the first time Tom Holland's Peter Parker goes up against Doc Ock. Now this is a very tiny little spoiler to touch on, not even a spoiler, just an Easter egg, and just the fact that Marvel listens to how much meme culture has impacted the world. The fact that Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn drops the line, you know, I'm somewhat of a scientist myself. I think that was just brilliant. And again, Marvel seems to know memeology back to front. They listen to what us meme things love. Now, towards the end of this video, I am building up to the very big spoilers and the very big reveals that you guys know that I'm gonna be touching on. But obviously we see that Aunt May met her demise at the end of the film at the hands of the Goblin's glider. And it was one of those things where when she first got hit by the glider, I thought she's gonna die. But then she started talking, she's having a back and forth with Peter, and then she drops to the ground. I'm like, okay, this is it, this is gonna happen. Someone could not survive an impact like that from anything, let alone the Goblin's glider. And the fact that she said to Tom Holland's Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility, I started to tear up. It's just one of those things where that quote has always been so powerful and so impactful since the Raimi Spider-Mans. The fact that this incarnation of Aunt May says that as well, right before her death, just really struck a chord, and it just really tugged at the heartstrings. And I got really sad when we lost Aunt May. She had such a pivotal role in this film. Granted, she was always kind of like the side character and the reacting character in Homecoming and Far From Home. She had so much more to do. She wanted to help Peter. She wanted to help save the world as well. Like, I love the fact that they gave her so much more to do. Okay, so to talk about this, I wouldn't even call it a spoiler, maybe half an Easter egg. We got to talk about the two big reveals first, and that is the reveal of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. So when Ned and MJ open up the Doctor Strange portal and we see a Spider-Man in a dark alleyway and we see the lenses widen up, I'm like, oh my god, that's Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. He jumps through into the room with Ned, MJ, and Ned's mum, and he takes his mask off, and it's Andrew fucking Garfield. I love the fact that this guy, for the longest time, was saying, I'm not in this film, leave me alone, and there he is. Now, a lot of people have probably seen that leaked photo online of Andrew on the green screen at the construction site. He's got his arm up on the pole there, and people were trying to decipher what he was saying. A lot of people thought it was deep fakery, but the Corridor crew debunked that and said, no, that's actual footage. If it is a deep fake, it's probably the best deep fake in the history of deep faking. And there's also the leaked photo with the John Campea watermark on it of Toby, Tom, and Andrew all on that scaffolding construction site, and it's very grainy and blurry. A lot of people were saying it's photoshopped, but we do end up seeing that scene slash shot in the film. Now, the fact that we get to see Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, and Tom Holland share a screen together as Spider-Man is absolutely brilliant, and it was handled in the best way possible. These two did not just have cash-grabbing cameos. They actually served a purpose, much like Aunt May. Everything had a purpose in this film, even the villains. And I know I'm all over the place at the moment, but I'm trying to cover as much as possible. So Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Sandman, Electro, Lizard, even probably not as much Lizard and Sandman, but the three pivotal villains in this film served a purpose. They had character arcs, they had a climax to the film, they served a purpose in the climax of the film. And from what I understand, in terms of Thomas Hayden Church as Sandman, he wasn't physically available for filming, he had other commitments, so they got his voice work done. But in terms of the motion capture and his likeness, that was actually pulled from archival footage from Spider-Man 3 back in 2007. So when we see him transform back into Flint Marko at the end, that is actually footage from Spider-Man 3, which it's one of those things, if an actor is physically unavailable because of other commitments, then you've got to try and find a way around it. And I didn't even know it was footage from Spider-Man 3 at the time when we first watched No Way Home. So in my eyes, it was flawless, it was seamless, even though it was very quick. And we also see Rhys Ifans as the Lizard, and then when he transforms back into Dr. Kirk Connors. Now, one thing that was very interesting about Electro's character arc, pun intended, pun not intended, was how power hungry he was. Pun intended, pun not intended. Just for more power, in terms of taking Tony's arc reactor and using that to power and fuel himself up instead of using power lines and stuff like that. We also see a very interesting shift with Otto Octavius slash Doc Ock, Alfred Molina's character, where Tom Holland's Peter Parker creates a brand new chip that is implanted in the back of Doc Ock's neck, thus turning him good again and wanting to save the world and help Peter, or should I say, Peter Cubed. Now, the stand-up performance in this film was Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. He was a scary motherfucker in this film, and he looks like he was having the best time. And again, going back to the fact that these aren't even cameos. The reoccurring characters and the returning characters from the other universes aren't just cameos. They all served a purpose to the story, and they were useful in the story. And Willem Dafoe just upped the ante. Like, you thought he was batshit insane in the Raimi trilogy. He is evil in this film. The scene where he's throwing down with Tom Holland's Peter Parker in the building, and they're bashing each other and they're going through the different levels, and he has that grin on his face, and Peter is just laying into him, and it's not even affecting him. That was scary. And obviously at the end, we see him stab Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker, and then they inject him with the antidote that turns him good again, and he realizes what he's done. It's like the Wolfman realizing what havoc it's done during the night. Again, this video is all over the place. This film just has has so much going on, so I'm trying to tick all the boxes. So going back to, I guess you could say it's half an Easter egg. One thing I really wanted to see with the 3 Spider-Man was the recreation of the pointing Spider-Man meme. And we kind of got that, but when they're as Peter Parker, ×3, when they're trying to figure out everything in the lab with a cure for the antidote and stuff like that, and they're trying to run numbers. And I love how well the 3 of them work together. They all have their own different skills and mindset and stuff like that. And then we do see Ned call Peter, and then all 3 of them are like, hi, I'm Peter, no, I'm Peter, I'm Peter. But I wanted to see the 3 of them in their suits pointing at each other. And I obviously think the fact that Into the Spider-Verse did that so well, and it hasn't been topped since, but it just would have been nice to have seen that. Now, during the climax of the film, we see a nice tender little moment between Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. And I know poor Andrew Garfield gets a lot of shade thrown his way. I thought he was a great Peter Parker and a great Spider-Man. It's just the movies that he was in weren't exactly top-notch. He did the best he could with what he was given because he's a phenomenal actor. And I love this little one-on-one that he has with Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker. And Tobey Maguire's essentially like, don't beat yourself up, man. You're amazing. And it was just really nice and sweet. And the fact that they're exchanging ailments and Tobey Maguire says, I've got bad back problems, which is a throwback to Spider-Man 2. And in fact, in real life, Tobey Maguire had back problems from filming Seabiscuit and then went on to film Spider-Man 2 and had really bad back problems. So that was a nice little throwback and a nice little nod to the fact that he's old. They're all getting old, and you know, Spider-Man can suffer from back problems. Okay, here's a very interesting Easter egg, the mention, or sort of the mention, of Miles Morales. So after Electro is cured and becomes plain old Max Dillon again, he mentions to Garfield's Peter, he then drops the line, there's gotta be a black Spider-Man out there somewhere, which at first I was like, oh my god, are we actually gonna see Miles Morales in this film? This is great, this is setting up something different for the next chapter. Ultimately, we did not see Miles Morales in the film, but that was still a nice little nod from Jamie Foxx. I really dug that. Very tasteful. Now, this scene right here, I wanted to weep, and I started to tear up, and it happened so quick, but it was so effective. The fact that we saw Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker save MJ when she was falling, when Tom Holland's Peter Parker could not, and when he catches her, he starts crying because he's finally redeemed himself after losing Gwen. I mean, the guy's had to live with this for years, the fact that he tried to save his girlfriend and ultimately that led to her demise. I just felt that was a great little character arc, and it just kind of tied things up in terms of his grief for Gwen. So during the climax of the film, of the construction site where the Statue of Liberty is with the Captain America shield, which I think is just a really interesting choice. I don't love it, I don't hate it, it's just really interesting. We see that the multiverse is starting to rip open again, and we see silhouettes of other villains coming through. Now, all I saw was a silhouette of Rhino. My friends were saying they could see other villains, but all I saw was Rhino because he was the biggest. So it gets to the point where Tom Holland's Peter says, this has to stop. Strange, you've got to get these guys out of here. We've got to get the other Peters back to their respectable homes along with those villains. And I need you to do the spell that's gonna make the whole world forget I ever existed. Obviously, with great power comes great responsibility, and the fact that it's led to this, you know, he started out as a little boy that wanted to be an Avenger. He's now a man that has now lost his aunt, and he's realized the gravity of the situation of being a hero and the losses that come with being a hero. So for that, he's got to sacrifice him being known as Spider-Man and Peter Parker. Strange does go ahead with the spell. The whole world does end up forgetting that Spider-Man and Peter Parker ever existed. And there's that beautiful little scene where Peter goes into the cafe where MJ's working. We see Ned there as well. They kind of know each other, and Peter goes to introduce himself to MJ, but he can't bring himself to do it. Not yet, anyway. We then cut to seeing Peter has made a brand new Spider-Man suit, which is a wonderful little throwback to the original look of the Spider-Man costume from the comics, the cartoons and stuff like that. It's a beautiful looking blue and a beautiful looking red, and we see him swinging through the city. It's snowing, and that looked really, really fucking amazing. It was emulating the look of Spider-Man Miles Morales. It looked absolutely beautiful with the snow and how it reflected off the suit, and it just made me want to see more. I want to see more of that suit, and again, that was a nice little throwback to the original look and aesthetic of the suit. Now, we do have a mid-credit scene and a end credit scene. Even though I wouldn't call it an end credit scene, it's more of a preview for an upcoming Marvel film. So the mid-credit scene, we see Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock from Venom and Venom to Let There Be Carnage. He's at a bar and he's in this brand new universe now, and the bartender is essentially bringing him up to speed with what's happened, and the Avengers exist, and he's trying to fathom that there's a guy in a tin suit that flies around, there's a big green guy. He then leaves the bar and we see a little bit of the symbiote left on the bar. And that obviously coincides with the end credit scene of Venom Let There Be Carnage, where we see Eddie Brock shift into Venom and he sees Tom Holland's Spider-Man on the TV after being exposed as Peter Parker to the world. But it's a given that these two universes are now officially linked. The end credits scene is actually a preview of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. We see footage of Doctor Strange enlisting the help of Wanda, and we saw some great footage of what's to come with that film, so I'm looking very forward to that. So in terms of wrapping this video up, guys, again, there is so much going on with this film. There is so much to be said about this film, and there are spoiler videos left, right, and center at the moment. I just wanted to drop my 2 cents on it. Again, it is my favorite Marvel film of all time. It is my favorite Spider-Man film of all time. And it's not to deter from what Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield did. Those films are brilliant in their own way, shape, and form. But in my opinion, this film was so brilliantly executed in terms of usage of reoccurring characters and not just cashing in on nostalgia, but actually giving nostalgia a purpose. It's not there just to show up, get a paycheck, and go home. It served a purpose in the story. Everything that happened that we've seen in the past came back, did it so damn well, and left us wanting more. So guys, drop a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Once you've seen the film, was it everything you wanted and more? Granted, film is one of the most subjective things ever, but the general consensus is everyone is loving this film. And I'm so glad this film is doing so well. And Tom Holland just absolutely killed it in this film. He really stepped up to the plate in this one. He really showed his acting chops in this one. I can't wait to see where his career goes after this. Guys, wherever you are in the world, have yourselves an absolute cracker of a day. I hope you're well, hope you're happy, be merry, be silly. And until next time, geeks, please always remember, cosplayers do it best.